Donovan King, a man in his mid-30s, had spent years working his way up in business, eventually earning enough to buy a sleek, modern home with a private pool in the gated community of Lakewood Gardens. As a black homeowner in an upscale neighborhood, Donovan felt both pride and a touch of apprehension, hoping his presence would be welcomed among his new neighbors. In the beginning, Lakewood Gardens appeared quiet and pleasant, neatly trimmed lawns, well-maintained sidewalks, and a guardhouse at the entrance ensuring privacy. Soon after settling in, Donovan discovered that not everyone in Lakewood Gardens embraced the spirit of neighborly harmony. One resident, Darlene Holbrook, had recently moved into the vacant property next door. At first, Donovan paid little attention to her beyond a polite wave whenever he saw her stepping into her shiny sedan. He assumed everyone in Lakewood Gardens had a common goal: peaceful living in a beautiful environment. The first sign of trouble emerged in subtle remarks from Darlene. While chatting with neighbors one morning, she made pointed comments about Donovan's choice of outdoor decor, mentioning how his modern planters clashed with traditional Lakewood Gardens design. A few days later, she commented on the classical music Donovan liked to play softly by the pool, hinting that it felt out of step with the neighborhood style. Although her tone was never overtly hostile, Donovan felt a current of disapproval running through her words. Donovan tried to brush it off, focusing instead on enjoying his newly purchased home. He spent quiet evenings swimming laps in his pristine pool, reading on the patio, or hosting small barbecues for old friends. However, each time he looked across the fence, he noticed Darlene's watchful presence. Sometimes she'd be checking her mail, other times watering a plant in her front yard, but always managing to cast a glowering glance in his direction. The uneasy feeling only grew. What do you think? Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking stories like this. Eventually, Donovan learned from another neighbor that Darlene had a reputation for being territorial, someone who believed the entire community should mirror her preferences. She'd already butted heads with the Oakbridge Council, the homeowners association that oversaw Lakewood Gardens, filing repeated complaints about excess noise from children playing in a nearby cul-de-sac. Donovan wondered if he might become her next target. Despite these ominous hints, he continued going about his life, hoping any friction would subside once they got used to each other's habits. He reasoned that, in a gated community, folks were bound to have occasional differences about aesthetics or lifestyle. Yet a part of him remained on edge, sensing a line might be crossed if Darlene's criticisms escalated. He wouldn't have to wait long. The tension brewing beneath Darlene's polite veneer would soon erupt, centering on the very aspect of Donovan's property he treasured most, his private pool. Unbeknownst to him, Darlene felt a simmering entitlement toward any luxury in Lakewood Gardens, and Donovan's tranquil backyard sanctuary was her next conquest. Although Donovan King did his best to remain civil, tensions in Lakewood Gardens intensified soon after Darlene Holbrook made her opinions clear about his so-called unorthodox style. A few subtle remarks ballooned into passive-aggressive jabs, and Donovan sensed that Darlene's hostility was more than a casual neighborly dispute. Yet he tried to stay optimistic, reminding himself that living in a gated community didn't automatically mean conflict. He had chosen this serene place precisely to escape urban stress. Everything changed one humid afternoon in the heart of summer. Donovan was working from home, finishing a virtual meeting, when he heard splashing from his backyard. This was unexpected, nobody else had a key to the gate, and he wasn't expecting visitors. Curious and a bit concerned, he headed outside. Rounding the corner of his modern patio, he found an unbelievable sight: Darlene Holbrook lounging in his pool on a bright inflatable raft, wearing oversized sunglasses as though she owned the place. Heart pounding, Donovan approached calmly, though he felt a surge of anger. "Excuse me, Darlene," he said. "This is my pool. What are you doing here?" She lifted her sunglasses, feigning surprise. "It's a hot day," she replied nonchalantly. "I assumed this was a community pool. After all, Lakewood Gardens is pretty exclusive. It makes sense we'd share amenities." Donovan stared in disbelief. "I'm sorry, but this is a private residence." The pool is on my property. Her expression shifted from feigned innocence to annoyance. Rolling off the inflatable, she stood waist-deep in the water. "Why are you being so possessive?" she asked with a condescending scoff. "Neighbors in Lakewood Gardens should look out for each other, share resources. Your big house has enough space for one more person to enjoy a dip." Though rattled, Donovan tried to keep composure. He explained politely that he paid for the home and the pool, and there was no shared facility in his deed. Darlene, however, acted as though she hadn't heard a word, complaining about how selfish it was that he'd keep such a luxury to himself. Eventually, Donovan insisted she leave, pointing out that if she desired a pool, the Oakbridge Council had a communal recreational center a few blocks away. With a huff, Darlene climbed out of the water, grabbed her towel, and stalked off in a fury, grumbling about unfriendly people. The nerve of the whole scene left Donovan shaken. He'd never encountered such blatant disregard for personal boundaries. Still, he hoped it was a bizarre one-off incident. Maybe Darlene misunderstood the property lines. Maybe she was used to more communal living arrangements elsewhere. Donovan gave her the benefit of the doubt, until the next day, when he found watery footprints by the gate, as though someone tried to re-enter while he was out. Enough was enough. Determined not to let this escalate further, Donovan decided to install a secure lock on the backyard gate and mount a security camera pointed at his patio. He refused to let Darlene or anyone else trespass freely on his property. As he researched home security systems, he couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity. Here he was, a new homeowner in a gated community, forced to fortify his own yard against a neighbor's sense of entitlement. A day later, the locksmith arrived, fitting a high-grade lock onto the gate. Donovan's newly purchased camera system went up as well, sending notifications to his phone if anyone approached. For a time, the pool area stayed quiet. Darlene seemed to hold back from any direct confrontation, though Donovan did notice her loitering by his fence a few times, muttering to herself. The tension, it seemed, was only momentarily contained. Sure enough, one evening Donovan sat in his living room, reading the news, when his phone buzzed with a camera alert. Checking the footage, he saw Darlene pressing on the locked gate, testing if it would yield. It didn't, and she stomped away in frustration. Donovan wasn't surprised but felt a chill of anger. Why was she so fixated on his pool? In the days that followed, Darlene's behavior took on a new dimension of brazen. She'd pass by Donovan's front walkway, throwing disapproving looks, sometimes muttering that it was unfair she'd purchased a home without a pool while he had one all to himself. Lakewood Gardens boasted uniform houses, but not all had private pools, some had to rely on the community rec center. Darlene, evidently, was outraged at her perceived shortcoming. Donovan tried to keep calm, confiding in a couple of neighbors. Many sympathized, shaking their heads at Darlene's rude intrusion. One neighbor suggested filing a formal complaint with the Oakbridge Council, but Donovan hesitated. He feared it might escalate tensions further. Instead, he hoped Darlene would accept that his pool was private and find a healthier way to channel her envy. That naive hope didn't last. One morning, Donovan walked out to find a strange note pinned to his fence: "You can't keep me out forever." The handwriting was large, almost cartoonish. He felt a jolt of dread. Was this a threat? Or some twisted attempt at intimidation? Either way, it confirmed Darlene wasn't done. Steeling himself, Donovan realized he needed to prepare for more serious pushback. People often responded poorly when faced with boundaries they didn't expect. In a matter of days, Darlene's sense of entitlement had evolved into a personal crusade to gain access to something that wasn't hers. Donovan suspected she might soon step beyond the threshold of petty confrontation into a realm of actual harassment. The locked gate and cameras gave him some reassurance, but he braced for what might come next, determined to hold his ground. What he didn't realize was that Darlene's tactics would escalate far beyond occasional trespassing attempts. In her mind, Donovan's refusal to share his pool was an affront to the supposed communal spirit of Lakewood Gardens, a spirit she'd misinterpret to justify calling 911 and leveling false accusations that could jeopardize Donovan's peace entirely. For a few weeks, Donovan King hoped the new security camera and locked gate would be enough to deter Darlene Holbrook's boundary-pushing antics. But even as he tried to settle back into a routine of morning swims and quiet afternoons by the pool, he couldn't shake the feeling that Darlene was brewing something more extreme. Each time he glimpsed her standing by her window, eyes fixed on his backyard, a warning bell sounded in his mind. One muggy Tuesday afternoon, Donovan returned from running errands to a peculiar sight, an official-looking notice pinned to his front door. Unfolding it, he found a typed message stating that his pool was subject to community usage under Oakbridge Council guidelines, and that denying residents access was in violation of the Lakewood Gardens sharing ethos. The letter was unsigned, but Donovan immediately suspected Darlene as the mastermind behind it. He double-checked the Oakbridge Council's regulations and found no such clause granting forced community access to private pools. Incensed by the blatant forgery, he decided to approach the Oakbridge Council in person. The next day, he drove to the HOA's modest office located near Lakewood Gardens' main gate. The receptionist, Ms. Yates, greeted him politely, and Donovan explained how he'd received a suspicious letter referencing the council's authority. Ms. Yates scanned the note and shook her head. "This is not from us," she said firmly, handing it back. "We have no rule requiring a private homeowner to open their pool to neighbors." Donovan left the office with mixed relief and frustration. The forgery was an escalation, a sign that Darlene would stoop to official mimicry to push her agenda. That evening, he typed up a quick log of events, from the day Darlene was caught using his pool without permission to the bogus note. His phone's security app confirmed no one had come near the gate that day, so Darlene must have placed the letter at his front door instead. He saved the evidence, suspecting he might need it if matters worsened. Sure enough, a few nights later, he was woken at around 10 p.m. by a loud knocking on his door. Groggy and alarmed, Donovan peered through the peephole to see two uniformed officers standing on his porch. Warily, he opened the door, identifying himself. One of the officers spoke first. "Sir, we received a 911 call from someone claiming they're locked out of their community pool, which is allegedly your backyard. They said you threatened them if they tried to access it." Donovan's heart sank. "That's not true," he began, stepping aside to let them in. He explained the entire fiasco, revealing his property deed, the gate's lock, and the security camera footage that captured no actual confrontation. The officers, professional and patient, verified the footage on Donovan's phone, seeing no sign of him threatening anyone. After a quick scan of the backyard to confirm it was indeed private property, they sighed, recognizing the call had been another false alarm. While the officers stood by, Donovan connected the dots out loud. "This must be from a neighbor, Darlene Holbrook, who's been harassing me about my pool." The officers exchanged looks, then one asked for her address, so they could speak with her directly. After finishing with Donovan, they walked next door to Darlene's unit. From behind his blinds, Donovan observed as the officers talked to Darlene. She gestured wildly, at times appearing to raise her voice, then slumped in exasperation. The officers eventually left, though Rena noticed they were shaking their heads. He'd later learn that Darlene repeated her claim that the pool was supposed to be communal, refusing to acknowledge the official property deed. The officers warned her about filing false police reports. Over the next few days, Donovan felt a strange tension drifting through Lakewood Gardens. Word spread that Darlene had called 911 on a neighbor just for using his own pool. Some residents whispered that she was making the entire community look bad, others empathized with Donovan, lamenting Darlene's misguided sense of entitlement. Donovan tried to keep calm, but the repeated 911 call left him uneasy. Such misuses of law enforcement could escalate dangerously if they continued. That apprehension proved valid when the petty harassments began morphing into actual hostility. Donovan woke one morning to find his trash bin toppled, garbage strewn across the driveway. Another time, he discovered that his sprinklers had been tampered with, the timing reversed so water flooded the yard mid-afternoon. While minor, these acts reeked of purposeful sabotage. Each new annoyance chipped away at Donovan's nerves. Matters grew more overtly threatening when he found a note taped to his back gate reading, "Stop hogging what isn't just yours." The penmanship matched the earlier, community usage, notice, clearly Darlene's handiwork. But the final blow came one weekend while Donovan relaxed in his backyard. He heard a sudden thunk near the fence, followed by a small rock landing inches from his feet. Heart pounding, he glanced up to see no one. But he suspected Darlene had thrown it, intentionally or not, risking bodily harm. That was it. Donovan dialed the local precinct, lodging a formal complaint of harassment. He turned over the notes, described the property damage, and shared camera clips of suspicious activity near his yard. Although the rock throwing wasn't captured in full, the sound and Donovan's startled reaction were recorded. The officer who took his statement seemed sympathetic, especially since Darlene's repeated 911 calls were already on file. At this point, even the Oakbridge Council, typically neutral to interpersonal drama, took notice. They'd received multiple nuisance complaints from Darlene but realized the real trouble might be her. One board member confided to Donovan that if Darlene continued causing problems, she'd face official sanctions or potentially face a lawsuit from the council itself. For Donovan, it was gratifying to see the tide turning, but he wasn't sure if formal censure would stop her recklessness. Finally, the crescendo built to a court case. Donovan learned that Darlene had hired a lawyer. Someone rumored to be known for aggressive representation. Donovan, not to be outdone, retained his own attorney, prepping to bring forth evidence of harassment, threats, and property damage. His main hope was a restraining order or any legal measure ensuring she keep her distance from him and his pool. In the weeks leading up to the hearing, Donovan felt a swirl of anxiety yet confidence in his documented proof, camera videos of her snooping around, the letters, the accounts of false 911 calls. Friends advised him to remain composed, presenting facts calmly. He took that advice to heart. Darlene's repeated, communal property, claim rang hollow in a legal context, especially with a well-defined property deed. As Donovan prepared for the upcoming trial, he marveled at how a single neighbor's unfounded sense of entitlement triggered a spiral of conflict. The minor friction about a private pool had escalated into false police reports, petty vandalism, and rock throwing. Now it would culminate in a legal showdown. Looking around his once tranquil backyard, Donovan felt a twinge of sadness at losing that initial sense of serenity. But with evidence in hand, he resolved to see this through, hopeful the law would affirm his right to enjoy his home unthreatened. On the morning of the court hearing, Donovan King woke earlier than usual. Having hardly slept, he downed a cup of strong coffee, mind cycling through the evidence he'd gathered against Darlene Holbrook. Outside, the sun crept over the rooftops of Lakewood Gardens, illuminating the quiet streets that had become a battleground of personal property rights versus a neighbor's inflated sense of privilege. Donovan arrived at the county courthouse, heart pounding. He wore a neat blazer, carrying a folder stuffed with printed emails, pictures of vandalism, copies of the threatening notes, and a timeline of every questionable incident. His attorney, Ms. Brooks, greeted him in the lobby with a reassuring nod. "We've got a strong case," she said, flipping through the documents. "Don't be rattled if the defense tries to muddy the waters." Inside the small courtroom, a few observers, curious neighbors, local reporters, plus some from the Oakbridge Council, settled in the pews. Donovan scanned the audience until he locked eyes with Darlene's stony glare. She sat alongside her lawyer, a tall man with a condescending smirk that hinted he'd try to paint Donovan in a negative light. As proceedings began, the judge briefly recapped the matters at hand. Donovan was seeking both a restraining order against Darlene and compensation for damages. Darlene's repeated trespassing, false 911 calls, and harassment had led to a flurry of complaints, culminating in allegations of property damage and intimidation. Darlene, on the other side, insisted Donovan was being overly dramatic and had conspired with the community to tarnish her reputation. The first round of statements let each side outline their version of events. Ms. Brooks depicted Donovan as a peaceful homeowner targeted by a neighbor's obsession with his private pool. She referenced the photographic evidence of footprints near the backyard, the signed affidavits from neighbors who'd witnessed Darlene's hostility, and logs from the local police station verifying her unfounded 911 calls. She also showed snapshots of the rock that nearly hit Donovan while he grilled, corroborated by a partial video feed capturing a loud noise from across the fence. Then Darlene's lawyer rose, affecting a tone of deep indignation. He claimed Donovan was misrepresenting normal neighborly disputes, that Lakewood Gardens had a tradition of shared amenities, and that Donovan weaponized local law enforcement to stifle a neighbor's rightful social access. According to him, Darlene was the victim here, an upstanding resident confused about community guidelines who was now suffering from Donovan's campaign of defamation. Donovan suppressed a disbelieving laugh, astounded at how they twisted the narrative. The judge listened patiently, eyes occasionally flicking from Donovan's calm demeanor to Darlene's rigid posture. Next, evidence was formally introduced. Ms. Brooks presented Donovan's property deed, highlighting the precise boundary lines around the pool. A short snippet from Donovan's security camera showed Darlene jiggling the locked gate. Another photo displayed the suspicious note pinned to the fence. She then read from a police report confirming that Darlene had made repeated, unsubstantiated calls for trespassing. The judge's brow furrowed as Ms. Brooks laid out a methodical chain of harassment. When it was Darlene's turn, her lawyer tried to undercut each piece of evidence. He claimed the camera footage was inconclusive, argued the note couldn't be definitively linked to Darlene's handwriting, and suggested the police were overly sympathetic to Donovan because of the negative press her 911 calls generated. Darlene, for her part, took the stand to deliver a monologue about how everyone in Lakewood Gardens used to share pool spaces, though she couldn't cite any official rule. She even cast Donovan's security measures as an aggressive act that made her feel unwelcome. On cross-examination, Ms. Brooks zeroed in on Darlene's repeated calls to the police. "You dialed 911 specifically claiming you were being denied communal access, correct?" Darlene reluctantly admitted so but insisted she believed the pool was a community feature. Ms. Brooks followed up, pointing out that the Oakbridge Council had no record of such a communal feature for Donovan's property. Darlene stumbled over her reply, deflecting that someone must have told her the pool was shared, but offered no name or proof. The tension peaked when Ms. Brooks asked about the rock incident. Darlene flatly denied throwing anything, claiming she had no idea a rock was found in Donovan's yard. Ms. Brooks produced a photo of the rock, along with timestamps from the security camera's audio recording of it clattering. While not definitive proof of Darlene's direct involvement, it underscored the suspicious context. The judge observed all this with a measured expression, nodding occasionally to each party's statements. After hours of testimony, the judge announced a short recess. Donovan retreated to the hallway, nerves on edge. Ms. Brooks offered reassurance, "We've established a clear pattern. I doubt the defense's spin can overcome the consistent evidence." Across the corridor, Darlene and her lawyer conferred in hushed tones, glaring at Donovan whenever their eyes met. Back in the courtroom, closing arguments ensued. Ms. Brooks reiterated Donovan's desire for a simple resolution, a restraining order to ensure Darlene couldn't come near his property or harass him further, plus compensation for damage and legal fees. She cited how Darlene's repeated misuses of emergency services and attempts at trespassing, combined with the threatening notes, constituted a clear campaign of harassment. Darlene's lawyer tried one last time to paint Donovan as overreacting. He insisted no actual harm was done, just minor property scuffles blown out of proportion. However, the judge appeared less than convinced, especially given the police records and consistent neighbor statements. A hush fell as the judge deliberated, flipping through the files on the desk. At long last, the judge spoke, her voice firm. "The evidence clearly supports Mr. King's claims of trespassing, harassment, and malicious behavior from Ms. Holbrook. I am issuing a restraining order. Ms. Holbrook must remain a specified distance away from Mr. King's property. Furthermore, Miss Holbrook will pay for documented property damage, as well as Mr. King's reasonable legal fees." She added a stern remark about the gravity of misusing law enforcement for personal vendettas. The courtroom atmosphere seemed to shift in an instant. Donovan exhaled, relief mixing with a swirl of triumph. He'd been validated in the face of Darlene's attempts to distort the truth. Meanwhile, Darlene clenched her jaw, her lawyer murmuring quietly, likely advising her on next steps or potential appeals. Donovan suspected she might remain bitter, but at least the law had drawn a line she couldn't easily cross. Stepping outside, Ms. Brooks congratulated Donovan. A handful of onlookers, neighbors from Lakewood Gardens, approached to offer supportive words. While Donovan appreciated the relief, he felt a pang of sadness that the conflict had reached a courtroom. A part of him still wished for a peaceful relationship with neighbors, not legal battles. But Darlene's relentless entitlement left no other path. By the time Donovan arrived home, the tension that had weighed on him for weeks began lifting. With a restraining order in place, he could once again swim in his pool or relax on his patio without fear of uninvited intrusion. He recognized that victory in court wouldn't necessarily change Darlene's mindset, but it allowed him to preserve the sanctity of his own space. That was enough for now. The day after Donovan King won his court case felt like a long overdue exhale. Dawn broke over Lakewood Gardens with clear skies, and Donovan, freed from the anxiety that had gripped him for months, relished the first truly peaceful morning in ages. He brewed coffee and sipped it on his patio, gazing at the shimmering water of his private pool. No more intrusive glares from Darlene Holbrook next door, he had a restraining order to keep her at bay. Yet, as he tried to embrace a sense of normalcy, Donovan couldn't forget the tension that had built up in the community. The rumors swirling about Darlene's meltdown, her unsuccessful attempts to paint him as the aggressor, and the outcome of the court hearing, these topics had become the talk of Lakewood Gardens. From the older couple across the street to the college kid renting a smaller unit, nearly everyone had an opinion. Donovan sensed that while many privately cheered for him, a few neighbors harbored reservations, possibly seeing him as the catalyst for neighborhood drama. Regardless, Donovan refused to keep dwelling on the negativity. He began reclaiming his routine, morning pool laps, evenings hosting small get-togethers with friends. He even decided to fix up some landscaping along the fence line, planting a row of hibiscus that added a tropical flair to his yard, something he'd put off while dealing with harassment. With the lawsuit behind him, he felt emboldened to enjoy the property he worked so hard to afford. Meanwhile, Darlene retreated from public view. Rumor said she was furious about her legal defeat and the restraining order that barred her from coming within a set distance of Donovan's property. A neighbor reported seeing her scowling on her porch, flipping through some architectural magazines as though concocting a new plan. Donovan noticed the occasional scuffling sounds from her backyard but didn't pry. She was legally bound to stay away from his yard, and that was enough for him. One day, as Donovan walked to his car, he noticed a new structure going up between his fence and Darlene's property. At first, he wasn't sure what it was. But over the following days, it became evident Darlene was constructing a privacy fence, a tall, solid barrier overshadowing the existing boundary line. The boards jutted so high that from Donovan's vantage, he could barely see a sliver of her house anymore. It struck him as somewhat comical. After all the time she insisted on accessing his pool, she now seemed determined to block her own view, possibly as a final act of defiance. The fence's construction was noisy and sudden. Donovan found scraps of lumber in the shared alley, plus the occasional chunk of material that ended up near his yard. Still, he tried to remain calm. Let Darlene erect whatever barrier she wanted, so long as it stayed on her side. The restraining order only covered personal approach, not her right to build on her property. Donovan accepted it as a petty parting shot. When the fence was complete, Darlene ceased all attempts to engage. She rarely left her house except for grocery runs, and even then, avoided crossing paths with Donovan. Some neighbors gossiped that she was licking her wounds. Others speculated she might sell and move away. Donovan had no idea if that was true, but he found the quiet a welcome change. Yet, he couldn't resist a small measure of symmetry. If she wanted to block the view, maybe he'd add something on his side. After all, she'd proven apt at petty gestures. So Donovan purchased tall hedges from a local nursery. Over a weekend, he spent hours digging holes along the fence line, planting the hedges so they'd soon tower above any structure Darlene erected. It wasn't out of spite, he told himself, just an aesthetic improvement ensuring he wouldn't have to glimpse her towering fence. If she demanded a line of division, so be it. After a few weeks, Donovan's hedges began to thrive, lush and green, forming a vibrant wall along his yard. Standing at his grill one evening, he admired how the synergy of the fence and hedges formed an insulating boundary, muffling noise and eliminating the uneasy stares that once passed between him and Darlene. In a strange twist, both neighbors had found a way to enforce privacy. Donovan welcomed the new arrangement. It allowed him to dine outdoors or lounge by the pool with zero sense of intrusion. While the final chapters of this conflict played out in hush, the rest of Lakewood Gardens watched from afar. The Oakbridge Council, apparently embarrassed by the fiasco, distributed a memo reaffirming private property rights and cautioning residents about crossing lines. Meanwhile, some neighbors approached Donovan to congratulate him on handling things through proper channels, rather than letting tensions become explosive. As for Darlene, her fence stood as a silent testament to her defeat in court. She no longer had the means to push her community pool narrative, nor could she easily lob complaints at Donovan. The restraining order effectively undermined her old habit of calling the police with false accusations. If she tried anything again, she'd risk immediate legal consequences. In quiet moments, Donovan reflected on how a single neighbor's sense of entitlement escalated into a legal battle. He was grateful for the evidence he'd gathered, the logs of each false complaint, and the supportive statements from other residents who'd witnessed Darlene's outbursts. Without that meticulous approach, the situation might have ended differently. He took it as a life lesson: no matter how absurd or trivial harassment may seem at first, it's important to document everything. At last, the poolside peace Donovan originally envisioned blossomed in earnest. He'd host weekend gatherings where friends appreciated the calm, occasionally amused by the towering fence next door. Some teased him about planting giant hedges, calling it Donovan's green wall, but he shrugged with a grin, acknowledging that all he wanted was a space free from conflict. One late afternoon, as Donovan finished a light workout in the pool, he caught a glimpse of Darlene's fence looming beyond the hedges. He recalled the chaos that swirled out of her single intrusion, how it forced him to defend his rights in a place that should have been restful. A pang of lingering frustration bubbled up. He'd lost precious months of tranquility to her antics. But the bigger victory overshadowed that regret. The law had upheld his ownership, the harassment ended, and he had the final say in how to enjoy his property. In time, even the local press moved on to other stories, leaving Donovan to his normal routine. The saga of the neighbor who tried to commandeer his pool receded into Lakewood Gardens lore, told only in hush to new residents as a cautionary tale. Donovan recognized that sometimes, standing firm wasn't just about a personal boundary, it was about maintaining a principle. By the end, he'd done exactly that, preserving not just a home, but the right to enjoy its comforts free from intruders. Months passed after Darlene Holbrook erected her massive privacy fence, and Donovan King found his life in Lakewood Gardens gradually returning to a calm he'd almost forgotten. The hedges he planted along his side grew thick, forming a leafy barrier that reinforced the message: each occupant should stay within their own domain. Surrounded by these buffers, Donovan reclaimed the sense of solitude he initially sought when he bought his luxurious modern home with its private pool. He realized how much time he'd spent mired in stress, worrying about surprise intrusions, collecting evidence, and bracing for potential false allegations. Now, freed from that mental burden, Donovan engaged more deeply with the community. He joined a small, wellness weekend group that did morning yoga by the clubhouse pond, chatted with neighbors about ways to revitalize the Oakbridge Council, making sure no one else became a Darlene 2.0, and even volunteered to help a local youth sports drive. It felt like the normalcy he'd craved all along. During these interactions, he picked up more tidbits about Darlene's ultimate stance. Apparently, after the court loss, she retreated into her house, seldom interacting with others. Some neighbors discovered that she tried to submit multiple appeals to the Oakbridge Council regarding her dispute with Donovan, all of which were dismissed for lack of merit. The council had no appetite to reignite a fiasco that already cost them goodwill and public embarrassment. Darlene's solitary fence project stood as her final, sullen statement. However, Donovan realized his respite might be tested. Every so often, a rumor cropped up that Darlene was complaining again, this time about the bright lights around Donovan's pool, or the occasional laughter when he hosted friends. Yet none of these complaints morphed into official threats. The new council leadership evidently recognized Donovan's right to enjoy his property as he saw fit, provided he didn't break any real regulations. One Saturday morning, Donovan was tidying his garage when a subdued knock sounded at the front door. Wiping his hands, he answered, expecting a package or perhaps a neighbor needing a tool. Instead, he found Clarence Johnson, a longtime Lakewood Gardens resident who had mostly kept to himself. Clarence held a folder of papers and looked uneasy. "Mind if I talk a minute?" he asked quietly. Donovan invited him inside, offering a seat in the living room. Clarence explained that he'd been collecting stories from neighbors about Darlene's behavior, even before Donovan arrived. "She's done this to others in smaller ways," Clarence said, opening the folder. It contained printed emails, typed notes, and recollections from residents who found themselves corrected or advised by Darlene on everything from mailbox color to how they watered their lawns. "Some folks were too scared or uninterested to stand up," Clarence continued. "But seeing you fight back and win made them realize they weren't alone." He nodded at the folder. "I compiled these accounts hoping we could present them to the council, pushing for guidelines that prevent any future resident from abusing the system like Darlene did." The sincerity in Clarence's eyes struck Donovan. He skimmed a couple of pages, reading about how Darlene would slip courtesy tickets under doors, as though she had official HOA sanction to punish minor aesthetic choices. She'd apparently used intimidation frequently, targeting newcomers and older residents with less energy to resist. By the time Donovan arrived, she'd honed that entitlement enough to claim an actual private pool. Appreciating Clarence's initiative, Donovan agreed that they should propose changes. "The council should refine its rules so no single homeowner can assume authority," he said. They discussed presenting the folder at the next Oakbridge Council meeting. Clarence expressed relief that Donovan didn't see him as meddling. He parted ways, grateful for Donovan's support. Later that week, they both attended the council session. Held in a small meeting room near the community clubhouse, the monthly gathering drew a larger audience than usual. Residents had become more vigilant after Darlene's fiasco, eager to see how the council was evolving. Marie Bass, the newly elected council chair, welcomed them to the microphone. Clarence outlined a vision for a residents' Bill of Rights, ensuring no property owners' personal freedoms were undermined by false community claims. Donovan added a succinct statement about the importance of clarifying which amenities were truly communal, like the clubhouse gym, versus strictly private. The memory of Darlene's attempts at calling his personal pool a community facility still made him cringe. The council members, some freshly appointed after the fiasco, nodded in agreement, acknowledging how local governance had flaws easily exploited by those with an overbearing mindset. They voted to form a committee to draft amendments to the HOA's bylaws. Donovan, never one to hog the limelight, politely declined a leadership role but agreed to provide feedback from a homeowner's perspective. He hoped this prophylactic measure would prevent future new residents from experiencing his ordeal. Meanwhile, the hush around Darlene persisted. She was conspicuously absent from the council meeting, her seat at the end of the table vacant. For all Donovan knew, she might have chosen to sever ties with the council. Some neighbors whispered that she'd quietly put her house on the market but found no buyers, her reputation preceded her. Others believed she planned to stay out of sheer stubbornness, refusing to be driven away. Donovan didn't particularly care which rumor was accurate, so long as she abided by the restraining order. One evening, as Donovan's best friend James visited for a casual barbecue, they lounged near the softly lit pool. Over sizzling steaks, James admired Donovan's newly planted hibiscus and the towering hedges. "This place is gorgeous," he remarked. "Hard to believe you had to fight tooth and nail just to enjoy it." Donovan nodded, exhaling a half-laugh. The ordeal felt almost surreal in retrospect, someone forging a self-righteous campaign to share what wasn't hers. James asked how Donovan felt about potentially living next to Darlene for the foreseeable future. Donovan shrugged. "She's still out there, but her power's gone. The restraining order, plus the council changes, keep her at bay. My only worry is random petty stuff, but if that resurfaces, I'll address it legally." He sipped iced tea, scanning the quiet yard. In the distance, the silhouette of Darlene's tall fence stood like a final testament to her attempt at physically and symbolically blocking him. As the night sky darkened, Donovan reflected on how adversity often reveals one's resilience. He'd been forced to stand firm not only for himself but for the principle that no bully, no matter how trivial their initial claims, had the right to strip him of his peace. By exposing Darlene's nonsense to the broader community and the courts, he set a precedent. Lakewood Gardens homeowners wouldn't cave to illusions of shared entitlement that contradicted property deeds. Now, as the hush fell over the pool, Donovan felt a profound sense of closure. In forging new, supportive alliances with neighbors like Clarence, he'd done more than secure his own yard. He'd spurred the Oakbridge Council to re-examine and refine how it governed, ensuring future residents wouldn't become victims of a single voice's warped vision. Scanning the starlit reflection on the water, Donovan let out a deep breath. He realized he might never fully relax about the memory of those phone calls or the hostility lacing Darlene's comments. But in the end, the law and the community recognized his rights. He'd come out the other side intact, and perhaps that truth alone made the entire struggle worthwhile. As the dust settled from the final court proceedings, Donovan King entered a chapter of relative calm. The swirling rumors of Darlene Holbrook potentially selling her home quieted down. She neither confirmed nor denied her plans, simply keeping to herself behind that imposing fence. Meanwhile, Donovan embraced a renewed focus on life beyond neighborly disputes. He poured energy into his career, discovered new hobbies, and engaged more actively with the Oakbridge Council to help reshape how Lakewood Gardens was governed. Word spread that Donovan's victory in court, coupled with his helpful stance at council meetings, boosted his reputation as a community-minded homeowner. Some neighbors who'd initially kept distance, uncertain about Darlene's claims, now apologized for not standing by him sooner. They confided that Darlene's unwavering confidence had made them second-guess Donovan's rightful ownership of the pool. He graciously accepted their apologies, acknowledging that not everyone is equipped to challenge a brazen personality. Still, a few pockets of the neighborhood harbored lingering resentment. Donovan heard whisperings that certain longtime residents felt he had brought tension to Lakewood Gardens by refusing to compromise with Darlene. Whether they truly believed that or were simply uncomfortable with confrontation, Donovan tried to not let such talk bother him. He recognized that no matter how justified he'd been, not everyone would see it that way. One day, Clarissa Barnes, an Oakbridge Council member, approached him at the local coffee stand. "We're revising the architectural guidelines," she explained, sipping her latte. "Could we run some proposals by you? We want to ensure nobody can twist them into an excuse for controlling private property." Donovan welcomed the chance, seeing it as a constructive aftermath of his ordeal. Over the next few weeks, he sat with council representatives, scanning drafts, highlighting ambiguous phrases, and suggesting clarifications like, "No private amenities shall be deemed communal unless explicitly stated in the property deed." Clarissa told him the council planned a big reveal of updated guidelines at the next community forum. She even invited Donovan to speak, praising how he'd championed fairness in Lakewood Gardens. He hesitated, not fond of the spotlight, but realized such an opportunity could set a positive example. So he tentatively agreed, promising to keep it brief. During that same stretch, Donovan's personal life blossomed. He began dating a colleague, Tiana Roberts, who found his Lakewood Gardens home as enchanting as he once had. Over dinners on the patio, Tiana asked about the drama with Darlene's fence. Donovan recounted the entire saga, her trespassing, false 911 calls, and ultimate court-ordered limitations. Tiana marveled at how a simple pool ignited such conflict, joking that it felt like a story from a homeowner's horror anthology. Despite the uneasy memories, Donovan chuckled with relief that it was largely behind him. In the days leading up to the forum, the tension simmered again when Donovan noticed a "for sale" sign leaning against Darlene's garage, though not yet planted in the yard. Perhaps she was considering listing her house if enough potential buyers expressed interest off-market. The idea that she might leave gave Donovan mixed feelings. On one hand, her departure could seal the end of conflict, on the other, he pitted any new occupant who might be clueless about the fence's backstory. He decided to keep an open mind. Maybe if she did move, the next neighbor would be friendlier. Finally, the evening of the community forum arrived. The event took place at the newly renovated Lakewood Gardens Meeting Hall, a space lined with wide windows offering glimpses of manicured hedges outside. Residents filled rows of folding chairs, exchanging casual greetings. Donovan slipped in with Tiana, taking seats near the front. He spotted Darlene in the back, arms folded, eyes fixed on the stage. Her presence reawakened a flicker of apprehension in Donovan's chest, but he resolved to stay calm. Clarissa Barnes opened with an overview of the revised guidelines. She emphasized clarifications about private versus shared amenities and introduced a new, resident rights section, ensuring no homeowner's domain could be involuntarily commandeered. The crowd murmured approval, a few nodding vigorously. The old guard who'd favored uniformity stayed silent, evidently resigned to the new direction. When Clarissa announced Donovan would speak, an amicable applause greeted him. Stepping to the podium, he felt a quiver of nerves. But once he began, his words flowed naturally. He acknowledged how he'd moved here for a serene environment, only to face a neighbor's attempts to seize his pool as communal. He recounted the crucial role of clear property deeds, supportive neighbors, and lawful measures that validated his rights. He thanked those who stood by him and concluded by encouraging the community to uphold empathy and fairness, so no one has to endure the same frustration or fear. To his surprise, a standing ovation followed. Some older residents clapped politely, but many genuinely seemed moved. Donovan flushed with gratitude, stepping off stage to rejoin Tiana, who squeezed his hand in pride. A reporter from a small local newspaper asked for a quick comment, and he repeated his main point: Lakewood Gardens can be a wonderful place if we value each other's space and see each other as equals. Meanwhile, Darlene hovered in the back, face expressionless. She made no attempt to approach or speak. After the forum concluded, Donovan noticed she left hurriedly, ignoring a council member who attempted to greet her. Clarissa commented quietly that Darlene's consistent refusal to cooperate with the new rules suggested she might not stay in Lakewood Gardens for long. That speculation proved true soon after. A few days later, Donovan emerged from his morning swim to see a "for sale" sign planted firmly in Darlene's yard. Later that day, a real estate agent escorted potential buyers around, while Darlene lurked on the porch, scowling. Donovan watched from behind the tall hedges, reflecting on how swiftly fortunes change. Less than a year ago, Darlene bragged about controlling who used what property. Now she seemed poised to depart entirely. Some neighbors confided in Donovan that they felt relief. With Darlene gone, Lakewood Gardens might rid itself of residual anxiety over petty policing. Others expressed caution, noting that new owners might have their own quirks. But Donovan figured it couldn't be worse than having a neighbor who literally tried to claim his pool. As the sign stayed up, multiple potential buyers cycled through. Donovan quietly hoped the eventual occupant would be open-minded and respectful. He pictured friendly barbecues, or at least cordial nods across the fence. The memory of lawsuits and restraining orders felt like a distant echo. He was ready to breathe easy. Eventually, the sale sign indicated a pending contract. Word leaked that Darlene accepted an offer slightly below her asking price. She refused to comment publicly, though a rumor emerged that she told someone at the local grocery store she was leaving because this neighborhood lacks moral order. Donovan shrugged when he heard the rumor. So be it. Everyone was entitled to their perspective, misguided though it might be. In a quiet moment, after the sale was finalized, Donovan glimpsed Darlene loading the last of her belongings into a moving truck. She gave the property one final glare, then drove off. No farewell, no parting shot. Just a silent departure overshadowed by the fence that once symbolized her attempts to isolate and dominate. Days later, Donovan stood at his fence line, noticing new voices beyond the hedges. Perhaps the new owners were settling in. He felt a sense of optimism. Lakewood Gardens had faced a storm of conflict, but the community's spirit endured, culminating in clearer rules and a renewed emphasis on mutual respect. For Donovan, the final outcome was simple yet profound. The man with a private pool now truly lived in peace, unburdened by the illusions of a neighbor who believed entitlement outweighed property rights. With Darlene Holbrook gone and her property sold, Lakewood Gardens entered a period of self-examination. The Oakbridge Council, once used by Darlene to file baseless complaints, actively rebranded itself as a supportive homeowners association focused on transparency. Donovan King, whose private pool had been at the center of the chaos, found his role in the community evolving. He was no longer merely a target but a source of trusted insight into fair neighborly practices. It began with an invitation. Council Chair Clarissa Barnes requested Donovan join a new subcommittee aimed at preventing future disputes like Darlene's. "We're calling it the Neighbor Harmony Initiative," she told him over a phone call. "We want to gather diverse viewpoints on how to set guidelines for everything from shared amenities to personal boundaries. You'd bring first-hand experience of how things can go wrong." Donovan hesitated. He wasn't eager to dredge up old tensions. But the notion of making Lakewood Gardens a more inclusive place appealed to him. After talking it through with Tiana, he agreed. At the subcommittee's first meeting, Donovan stepped into the community hall with mild trepidation. He recognized a few faces from the chaotic forum weeks back. To his relief, there were no hidden scowls or half-veiled accusations. Instead, he encountered friendly gestures, some individuals nodding in sympathy, acknowledging the ordeal he'd endured. In a circle of folding chairs, they brainstormed new or revised rules, clear private versus shared space definitions, exactly which facilities were truly communal, like the clubhouse pool, gym, walking trail, and which were strictly personal property. HOA complaints transparency, requiring that all official complaints be logged and reviewed, preventing a single voice from pushing through unverified claims. Dispute resolution pathways, encouraging neighbors to communicate directly or use informal mediation before jumping to official measures or calling the police. Donovan was heartened by these proposals. He recalled how Darlene had weaponized the vague assumption that all pools in Lakewood Gardens might be communal, plus the ease of filing repetitive complaints with the Oakbridge Council. Formalizing boundaries and processes could block future troublemakers from following her playbook. Still, not everyone in the subcommittee fully grasped Donovan's experience. A couple of longtime residents, used to a quiet, unspoken code, shrugged at the need for written clarity. "We never had problems before," one commented. Donovan firmly responded that just because no one in the past was as brazen as Darlene didn't mean the rules were fine. "We got lucky," he insisted. "But luck isn't a policy." Slowly, compromise emerged. Some older members recognized that times had changed. Lakewood Gardens had grown more diverse, with new residents from varied backgrounds who couldn't rely on unspoken customs. The subcommittee thus hammered out a consensus. They'd craft a formal set of guidelines, user-friendly and explicit. They also recommended a monthly neighbors forum, where residents could voice concerns without escalating to official reports or 911 calls. Donovan silently wished something like that had existed before Darlene latched onto his pool. Meanwhile, in his personal life, Donovan embraced a sense of freedom. He'd chat with Tiana about potentially hosting a small yard gathering to celebrate a fresh start. The Oakbridge Council's subcommittee gave him a place to direct leftover frustrations, channeling them into something constructive. Each morning, he'd swim a few laps in the pool, or unwind in the evenings with soft jazz drifting from his speakers, no longer feeling the old knot of dread about being watched or confronted. One day, while pruning his newly thriving hedges, Donovan glimpsed the new neighbors who'd purchased Darlene's home. A middle-aged couple stepped onto their porch, scanning the fence line. Curious, Donovan waved tentatively over the tall barrier. To his mild surprise, they signaled back, their gestures a bit awkward but friendly. Later, as he placed the pruning shears back in his garage, he found a handwritten note by his front door. "Hi. We're the Patels, Raj and Priya. Looking forward to meeting you." The contrast to Darlene's menacing notes made him grin. Over the next few weeks, Donovan introduced himself. He learned the Patels had chosen Lakewood Gardens for its reputation of safety and hoped to find a welcoming environment. He gave them a rundown of local resources, where to grocery shop, which restaurants to try, and even a quick backstory, minus the detail that the old homeowner had once tried to claim his pool. The Patels admired Donovan's yard design, praising his taste. Donovan felt a wave of relief, maybe the tension that once defined this property line had vanished with Darlene's exodus. Around the same time, the subcommittee concluded drafting its final version of new guidelines. They slated a special community vote, inviting all residents to come read and decide. Donovan was asked to present a short speech about why these reforms mattered. He prepared bullet points referencing how misunderstandings about property lines or personal boundaries could quickly spiral into lawsuits. On the evening of the vote, the community center teemed with people, some curious, some hesitant. Donovan delivered his piece confidently, stressing that transparency helps everyone. No one wants their quiet enjoyment undone by false assumptions or power trips. The motion passed with a strong majority. The Oakbridge Council adopted the revised regulations, clarifying private versus communal amenities and instituting a neighbor dispute resolution protocol. The applause that followed signaled a significant shift. Lakewood Gardens recognized it couldn't rely on tradition alone but needed firm guidelines that protected each person's rights and possessions. Donovan exhaled a satisfied breath, recalling the fiasco that triggered this reform in the first place. In the aftermath, local news outlets ran small features praising Lakewood Gardens for turning conflict into positive change. Some gave Donovan credit as a catalyst. He found the attention a bit much. He hadn't sought the role of poster child for property rights. Still, if his ordeal prevented future fiascos, he considered it worth it. Tiana teased him, "You're basically the neighborhood hero now." Donovan laughed, responding that he just wanted a peaceful life. With the new owners next door settling in, Donovan had reason to believe his day-to-day existence would remain tranquil. The tall fence no longer felt menacing, it was simply a vestige of an old occupant's bitterness. Meanwhile, Donovan's hedges turned a vibrant green, forming a pleasant gardenscape that truly sealed off his yard as a private oasis. Each day, he'd sip iced tea by the pool, enjoying the mild Florida breezes or drifting into a daydream under the sun's rays, all without glancing nervously over the fence. One late afternoon, the Patels invited Donovan to a small housewarming get-together. Over snacks and conversation, he marveled at how simple neighborly kindness could transform Lakewood Gardens from a place of tension to one of genuine community. As they parted ways that evening, Donovan felt a wave of contentment. The complex had come full circle, from a place overshadowed by an entitled occupant to one forging a path of collaboration and mutual respect. Though the name, Darlene Holbrook, might linger in Lakewood Gardens lore for years, Donovan found solace in the knowledge that her intrusive reign ended. The entire fiasco reaffirmed his belief that with enough documentation, unwavering resolve, and a supportive circle, be it the law, the HOA, or neighbors who open their eyes, entitlement and bigotry can be challenged and defeated. Late one evening, as Donovan turned in for the night, he took a final glance at the starlit pool from his bedroom window. Memories of confrontation and stress fluttered through his mind, but they felt distant now. Tomorrow would bring another day of routine, a morning swim, a coffee, maybe a wave to the friendly couple next door, all in calm unity. That sense of quiet triumph, earned through perseverance, was something no fence or neighbor's illusions could take away. 3 months after the dust settled, Donovan King found himself reflecting on how drastically his life in Lakewood Gardens had changed since Darlene Holbrook's exit. The new neighbors, Raj and Priya Patel, integrated smoothly into the community, forging connections without stepping on personal boundaries. Donovan relished the tranquility he'd originally sought, free from the anxiety that once overshadowed his every move. In a way, Darlene's saga became something of an urban legend within the gated enclave. Older residents whispered about the time someone tried to claim another's pool, cautioning any newcomer not to cross private property lines. The reformed Oakbridge Council guidelines had already prevented a few minor disputes from escalating, just a handful of clarifications were enough to handle noise or design gripes amicably. It felt like a testament to the changes sparked by Donovan's confrontation. Meanwhile, Donovan's routine continued to revolve around morning swims and weekend gatherings. He often invited Tiana over, and they explored new ways to decorate the backyard. One bright afternoon, they decided to repaint the fence near the pool in a soothing hue that complemented the lush hedges. Gone was the memory of Darlene's monstrous fence overshadowing his yard, the landscape felt like it blossomed with renewed optimism. Occasionally, Donovan pondered the final status of Darlene. Last he heard, her house sold at a reduced price, and she'd quietly moved away. Rumor suggested she relocated to a smaller, older suburb, presumably lacking a private pool. Donovan bore no lingering grudge, he simply hoped she'd learned boundaries about other people's property. If not, well, at least she couldn't trouble him anymore. In quieter moments, Donovan mused on how a trivial tension, a neighbor believing she had communal rights to his backyard, morphed into a fully fledged legal battle. Yet that conflict ended up strengthening him. He'd gained a deeper understanding of property law, discovered unwavering support from unexpected neighbors, and inadvertently improved the entire community's guidelines. He concluded that confronting bigotry and entitlement was worth the hassle, if it meant ensuring safer, clearer living for everyone. One evening, he strolled to the community center for an Oakbridge Council meeting. Attendees greeted him with friendly nods, no longer overshadowed by any suspicion or drama. The council updated residents on ongoing improvements, fresh landscaping around the entrance, a new playground for families. Donovan contributed to small discussions about noise ordinances, feeling a faint nostalgia. The once ominous mention of neighbor disputes had disappeared from the agenda, replaced by routine housekeeping matters. A sense of closure settled in Donovan's mind as he left the meeting. The pool incident would remain a memorable anecdote he might share with future acquaintances. I once had a neighbor who tried to claim my pool as communal. But he also realized how quickly adversity could shape a person. He was more confident in asserting his rights now, unafraid to call out injustice. If Darlene's fiasco taught him anything, it was that bullies bank on silence. By speaking up, documenting every step, and trusting legal channels, he prevailed. Standing by his front walkway, Donovan gazed up at a sky bursting with twilight colors. The hush of Lakewood Gardens enveloped him. The same hush that once felt menacing now gave him comfort. The new normal was exactly what he initially wished for, a place to live privately, enjoy the pool, and not worry about who might intrude. In a strange way, Darlene's departure and the subsequent changes left him in an even better position than before. Freed from unspoken tensions, Lakewood Gardens embraced a spirit of genuine neighborliness. Turning the key in his lock, Donovan stepped inside, a relaxed smile on his face. Tomorrow might bring the usual routine, emails to handle, a dinner with Tiana, maybe a quiet read under the poolside lantern. Life had returned to the predictable, pleasant flow of suburban living. It felt almost surreal that once, just months ago, he stood on a precipice of daily harassment and legal threats. Before switching off the hall light, Donovan spotted a small framed document on his entry table, the official property deed that verified his private pool's boundaries, once presented in court as evidence. He'd left it out as a reminder of his journey, though now it functioned mostly as decor. Smiling, he gave it a gentle pat, thankful that the little piece of paper had played a large role in defending his peace. In the end, he realized the entire ordeal underscored a universal truth. Standing firm for one's rights and dignity can be nerve-wracking but essential. By doing so, not only had he safeguarded his own haven, but he'd also helped ensure that Lakewood Gardens, as a whole, became a fairer, more respectful neighborhood. And that, in his eyes, was an achievement that transcended any personal vendetta. With the turbulence behind him, Donovan King slipped into a fulfilling rhythm at Lakewood Gardens. Each day began with a sunrise workout in his private pool, a routine once disrupted by the fear of an uninvited neighbor. Now, the only watchers were the morning birds perched on his hedges, a tranquil reminder that he could finally enjoy his space as he intended. As weeks turned to months, Donovan's relationships with the community flourished. He maintained friendly chats with neighbors, no longer haunted by sideways glances or hushed gossip about the pool incident. The reformed Oakbridge Council thrived under new leadership, hosting monthly social events to foster unity. Donovan occasionally attended, greeting new residents, sharing tips on local services, and quietly volunteering whenever help was needed. Now and then, he'd think back to Darlene Holbrook, recalling how her sense of entitlement had escalated from mild remarks to destructive aggression. He supposed she had served as a cautionary example of how easily a single person's misplaced claims could disrupt a neighborhood. The fact that the legal system validated his stance, and that the community ultimately saw through her charade, spoke volumes about the power of evidence, unity, and the readiness to defend what's right. In rare moments, Donovan wondered if Darlene ever regretted her actions. Possibly, she merely blamed him or the Oakbridge Council, refusing to recognize her own role. Either way, her story no longer consumed him. Having restored privacy and calm, Donovan enjoyed hosting weekend brunches by his pool, inviting Tiana, a few close friends, and occasionally neighbors who had become genuine companions. Together they'd laugh about simpler topics, new restaurants in town, local sports, far removed from any talk of intrusions or lawsuits. One afternoon, Donovan found himself lying on a patio lounger, reading a novel. The sun's warmth contrasted pleasantly with the cool breeze wafting across the water. Gazing over the pool's edge, he appreciated how unremarkable it now felt, simply an amenity he cherished, not a contested battleground. It amazed him how something as trivial as a pool could spark such a dramatic conflict, yet here he was, free to relax without glancing at the fence every few minutes. He also acknowledged the growth the ordeal prompted in him personally. Where once he might have tried to appease or avoid confrontation, he now understood the necessity of assertiveness. Setting firm boundaries, documenting every transgression, and trusting the legal route had proven effective. And while confrontation wasn't his preference, letting bullies walk over him wasn't an option. The experience made him more assured in other aspects of life, too. He felt that if he could handle a neighbor's brazen campaign, he could tackle any unexpected twist in his path. Occasionally, new arrivals to Lakewood Gardens would spot Donovan's impressive backyard and ask about the tall hedges. He'd offer a faint grin, vaguely mentioning they were planted after a boundary dispute. If pressed for details, he kept it succinct, summarizing the conflict with Darlene in general terms, emphasizing the positive outcome. In truth, the conflict was behind him, and he preferred not to reduce his home to a war story. He wanted to be known for kindness and hospitality, not just the man who fended off a neighbor's bizarre claim. As the months wore on, that's exactly the reputation Donovan cultivated. Neighbors admired his gracious hosting style, drawn to the peaceful gatherings he occasionally arranged. Some even teased that he'd become the unofficial ambassador of Lakewood Gardens. Donovan shrugged off the label, but a quiet pride welled up in him. He'd come a long way from those tense afternoons when he felt cornered in his own domain. One mild autumn evening, as Donovan shut off the pool lights and locked his patio door, he let himself reflect for a moment on the entire journey, from buying the house and discovering Darlene's intrusion to the culminating court victory and ultimate tranquility. It struck him that adversity often reveals a community's character. Lakewood Gardens, once overshadowed by one person's toxic sense of ownership, had rallied around fairness, updating rules, and reaffirming that no single individual could dictate private property boundaries. Switching off the last light, Donovan headed upstairs to bed, contentment replacing any trace of worry. The hush of the night made him think of how a single locked gate had once felt inadequate to keep out drama. Now, however, the intangible barriers of respect, mutual understanding, and legal clarity formed a much stronger shield. He slept soundly, confident that in Lakewood Gardens, and indeed in life, one can prevail against misguided entitlement by standing resolutely for the truth. Thus ended the chapter of his neighbor's uninvited claims and false 911 calls. Dawn would bring another day of quiet routine, a refreshing swim, a gentle sunrise, and perhaps new neighbors who embraced genuine community spirit, precisely what he'd envisioned when he first moved here. And that, Donovan felt, was the ultimate victory worth cherishing. Hey everyone! If you found this story powerful and meaningful, please show your support by hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, ringing the bell to never miss our thought-provoking content. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that inspire, educate, and challenge perspectives. Thank you for being part of this journey.